Ethan Cole's hands had stopped shaking 3 years ago. The day he buried the last piece of his heart in the frozen ground outside Boise, the trembling finally ceased. In its place came a numbness so complete that some mornings he forgot he was still breathing. But on this January evening in 1889, riding through Montana Territory with nothing but ghosts for company, his hands began to shake again. The sound came first, a wet, rattling cough that cut through the howling wind like a blade through silk. Ethan had heard that sound before in field hospitals during the war in the homes of dying men he'd tried to save. It was the sound of lungs giving up, of a body surrendering to the cold. His horse had thrown a shoe 3 miles back. He'd been walking since leading the animal through snow that reached his knees, squinting against the dying light. The barn appeared like a ghost itself, half buried in a drift, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. He should have kept walking. Should have made it to whatever excuse for a town lay ahead, found a livery stable, a warm bed, a bottle to chase away, the memories that never slept. But that cough, that terrible drowning cough. Ethan pushed through the door. 6 pairs of eyes stared back at him from the darkness. They were children. All of them. Huddled together in the corner like a litter of abandoned pups, arms wrapped around each other in a desperate attempt to share warmth that wasn't there. Their lips had gone the blue-black color of frostbite. Their breath came in shallow gasps, each exhale a small cloud of vapor that hung in the frigid air before dissolving into nothing. The smallest one, a girl who couldn't have weighed more than 30 pounds, opened her eyes. They were the pale blue of winter ice, clouded with exhaustion and something else, something that looked almost like hope. Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible, over the wind screaming through the gaps in the walls. "Are you the angel Mama promised would come?" Ethan's knees hit the frozen hay. The impact sent shocks of pain up his legs, but he barely felt it. He was staring at this child, this impossibly small child, and seeing another face, dark hair instead of blonde, brown eyes instead of blue, but the same trust, the same terrible, innocent trust that adults would save them. Emma had looked at him like that once, the last time he'd left for a job, kissing his daughter's forehead and promising to be home in a week. She'd grabbed his coat with her tiny fists and asked if he was going to catch all the bad men, and he'd laughed and said, "Yes, sweetheart. Papa's going to catch all the bad men." He'd caught one, a horse thief who'd led him on a 3-week chase through Idaho, and while he'd been chasing a man who'd stolen livestock, his family had burned. "I ain't no angel, sweetheart." The little girl's face didn't change. She just kept staring at him with those clouded eyes, her small body shaking so hard, her teeth chattered. "Mama said angels come when we need them most. We need you most now." Something moved in the shadows. A boy older than the rest, maybe 12 years old, pushed himself to his feet. He was thin. They were all thin. But this one carried himself with the rigid posture of someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast, too hard. His hand gripped a piece of splintered wood, jagged end, pointed at Ethan's chest. "Stay back, mister!" The boy's voice cracked on the words, but his jaw was set like granite. "We ain't got nothing worth taking." Ethan raised his hands slowly, palms out. No weapons, no threat. Just a man too broken to be dangerous. "I ain't here to take nothing, son. Heard coughing. Came to see what—" He trailed off. His eyes had adjusted to the darkness now, and he could see them properly. Could see all of them. A black boy, maybe 9 years old, curled on his side. Each breath wheezed out of him with a wet rattle. Dark blood stained the hay beneath his mouth. Consumption, advanced consumption. The kind that killed slowly and painfully and without mercy. A girl with wild red hair and an Irish lilt even in her frightened silence. A bandage covered her right eye, the cloth stained and dirty. But her left eye watched him with fierce intelligence, calculating whether he was friend or foe. 2 boys who had to be twins. Same sandy hair, same sharp features, same age. One had a twisted leg, the foot turning inward at an unnatural angle. He leaned against his brother, who stared at nothing, with eyes that had gone somewhere far away and might never come back. And the tiny blonde girl, 4 years old at most, clinging to the older boy's leg like he was the last solid thing in a world that had turned to ice. 6 children, alone. in an abandoned barn in the worst winter Montana had seen in a decade. "When's the last time you all ate silence?" The kind of silence that spoke louder than words. The red-haired girl finally answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Day before yesterday. Sam found bread behind the bakery. We shared it." Sam. The older boy. The one with the stick who was trying so hard to protect the others from a world that had already broken them. "Where's your folks?" Sam's face went hard. Harder than any 12-year-old's face should ever be. "Dead? Gone? Don't matter. We're what we got." The black boy coughed again. More blood, bright red against the white snow that had drifted through the gaps in the walls. He was dying. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Too soon. "How'd you end up here?" Sam's grip tightened on his makeshift weapon. His whole body was vibrating with some combination of fear and fury and the terrible exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting too long. "We was at Grace Haven, the orphanage, Reverend Sterling's place." The sick boy spoke, then his voice weak but sharp with intelligence. "He put us out 3 days ago, said the cold would take us to Jesus faster than feeding us would." The words landed in Ethan's gut like a fist. He'd seen cruelty before, had witnessed things during his years as a marshal that still woke him screaming in the night. But this casual disposal of children, this calculated murder dressed up as God's will. A reverend said that. It wasn't a question. Reverend Sterling ain't a man of God. The sick boy's eyes met Ethan's, and in them was a wisdom no child should possess. He's a devil in a preacher's coat. Ethan stood slowly, his decision already made. It was stupid. It was reckless. It would probably end with him dead or worse, but he was going to do it anyway. Because 5 years ago, he'd made a choice. He'd chosen to chase a criminal instead of staying home with his family, and that choice had cost him everything. His wife Sarah, with her quick laugh and her gentle hands and her absolute certainty that the world was fundamentally good. His son Michael, who'd wanted to be a marshal just like Papa. His daughter Emma, who'd believed angels came when you needed them most. He couldn't bring them back, couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the moment when he'd ridden away instead of staying, but he could choose differently now. "All right." He kept his voice steady, authoritative, the voice that had once commanded respect across 3 territories. "We're leaving, all of you, right now." Sam's eyes narrowed with suspicion, sharp enough to cut. "Why, what do you want from us?" The question hit deeper than the boy could know. What did he want? Redemption, forgiveness, a way to quiet the voices that screamed in his head every night. Ethan met the boy's eyes and told him the truth. "I had kids once. A boy and a girl. Twins. They died 5 years ago in a fire while I was 300 miles away, chasing a man who didn't matter. I wasn't there when they needed me." His voice caught on the words, but he pushed through. "So I ain't doing this because I'm good. I ain't doing it because I want something from you. I'm doing it because I got a debt I can't never repay. And maybe helping you all is a start. Maybe it ain't, but I gotta try." The barn went silent except for the wind. The children stared at him, these small, broken creatures who'd learned too young that adults lied and promises meant nothing. The little blonde girl tugged on Sam's sleeve. "Sammy, I'm cold. I'm so cold." Something cracked in Sam's face. The hard shell he'd built around himself split just enough to show the frightened child underneath. He looked at Ethan, really looked at him, searching for the lie he was certain had to be there. Whatever he saw made his shoulders drop. Just a fraction. Just enough. "There's a town nearby, Redemption Creek, 3 miles east. There a doctor was. Dr. Morrison died 2 years back. His widow runs the place now. She ain't a real doctor, but she knows enough." Ethan started unbuttoning his heavy wool coat. "Then that's where we're going." He held the coat toward the smallest girl. She stared at it like it might bite. "Go on, take it. You're shaking so hard I can hear your teeth from here." "Mister, you'll freeze." "I've survived worse." He hadn't, actually. But these children didn't need to know that. The girl took the coat with trembling hands. It swallowed her whole, the hem dragging in the hay, but for the first time since he'd opened that door she stopped shaking. "You smell like horses," she whispered, burrowing into the wool. "I like horses." "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Grace. Grace Williams. But I don't remember my mama or papa. Sammy says I was left on the church steps when I was a baby. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Emma had been left on church steps too, in a manner of speaking. Left in a church cemetery under 6 feet of dirt. He pushed the thought away and turned to the sick boy. "Can you walk?" "Don't got much choice." The boy tried to stand and immediately collapsed. Sam caught him, holding him up with arms that shook from the effort. "His name's Elijah Monroe." Sam's voice was rough. "He's smart, smarter than all of us, and he's dying." "Not today, he ain't." Ethan bent down and lifted Eli in his arms. The boy weighed almost nothing, a bundle of bones and fever and desperate will to survive. "You gonna carry me all the way to town?" "If I have to." "Why, already told you why." Eli studied his face with those 2 old eyes. "You got ghosts, mister. I can see them hanging on you. Heavy. Everybody's got ghosts. Not like yours. Yours are screaming." Ethan didn't answer. Couldn't. Because this sick child had seen straight through him with a single glance. The journey to Redemption Creek was 3 miles of frozen hell. Grace walked beside him in his coat, her small hand gripping his belt to keep from falling. Sam carried one of the twins on his back, the boy with the twisted leg. The silent twin walked beside them, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. The red-haired girl guided them, humming Irish ballads in a voice like wind chimes. She held Eli's hand when Ethan had to set the boy down to rest, singing softly about green hills and mothers who waited across the sea. They passed the first buildings of Redemption Creek just as the last light died. Wooden structures huddled against the cold smoke rising from chimneys, the warm glow of lanterns in windows. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 6 children had been left to die 3 miles away. The town was small, maybe 200 souls. One main street with a general store, a saloon, a blacksmith. And at the edge of town, separate from the others, a building with peeling white paint, and a sign that read, "Grace Haven Orphanage," in letters that had seen better days. Ethan felt the children tense as they approached, felt Sam's hand tighten on the twins' legs, heard Grace's breathing go quick and shallow. The door of the orphanage opened. A figure stepped out, tall and thin, dressed in black that seemed to swallow what little light remained. The man raised a hand in greeting, his face arranging itself into an expression of benevolent concern. "Good evening, stranger." The voice was warm, honey-smooth and sweet and completely false. "I see you've found my lost lambs. How wonderful. God answers prayers." Reverend Joshua Sterling, Ethan knew without being told. Knew from the way the children shrank back, from the way Grace made a small whimpering sound and hid behind his legs, from the way even brave stubborn Sam looked ready to bolt. They weren't lost. Ethan kept his voice level. They were put out. Sterling's smile never wavered. "Oh dear. I'm afraid the children have misled you. They wandered off 3 days ago. We've been searching desperately. These poor troubled souls, they sometimes fabricate stories to gain attention. It's a common affliction among the abandoned." "That's a lie." Eli's voice came out as a rasp. "You told us Jesus would take us faster. You said we were defective. You said—" "Hush now, Elijah. You're delirious with fever." Sterling took a step closer. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless in the fading light. And they held nothing. No warmth, no mercy, no humanity at all. "These children are wards of Grace Haven Orphanage. What you're doing, removing them without authority, constitutes kidnapping. What you did, leaving them to freeze, constitutes murder." Sterling's smile finally cracked. Just a fraction, just enough to show the predator underneath. "Strong words, Mr. Cole. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole." Sterling's eyes swept over him, cataloging, assessing. "You're not from Redemption Creek, just passing through, I imagine. A drifter. A man with no ties, no authority, no standing in this community." He turned to the children, his voice taking on that honey sweetness again. "Come along now, time to come home." "No!" The word burst from Sam like a gunshot. "Please, Mr. Cole, please don't let him take us." Grace was crying, now silent tears streaming down her face. The twin who could speak was whispering, "No, no, no," over and over. Even the silent twin had his eyes squeezed shut, his whole body rigid with terror. Ethan looked at these children, looked at their fear, their desperation. Their absolute certainty that being taken back to Grace Haven meant death, if not of the body, then of something more fundamental. He'd failed his own children, had left them when they needed him most, had chosen duty over family and paid a price that would haunt him until his last breath. He would not fail these. "There's a doctor in this town." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "Dr. Morrison's widow, Mrs. Morrison. But I assure you, then that's where we're going. These children need medical attention. After that, we'll discuss who they belong to." "You're making a grave mistake, Mr. Cole. Wouldn't be the first time." Ethan turned his back on the Reverend and started walking. The children followed, pressed close, like they were afraid he might disappear if they let him out of their sight. Behind them, Sterling's voice carried on the cold night air all pretense of warmth gone. "I know men like you, Cole. Men carrying ghosts. Men trying to save others to save themselves. It never works. Those children will be back with me, and you will regret the day you stopped at that barn." Ethan didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the threat, just kept walking toward the lights of town, toward the clinic that sat at the edge like an afterthought toward a woman he'd never met who might be their only hope. Grace's hand found his, her small fingers wrapped around his calloused palm. "Mr. Cole." "Yeah, sweetheart. Are you really going to keep us safe?" He looked down at her, at this child who'd been abandoned on church steps, who'd survived God knew what horrors in Sterling's orphanage, who still believed angels came when you needed them most. "I'm going to try." That's all Mama said angels could do. Try their best. The Morrison Medical Clinic appeared ahead, a small wooden structure with smoke rising from the chimney and a lamp burning in the window. A sign beside the door read, "All welcome," in letters that had been painted over and touched up so many times they looked like prayer. Ethan knocked. No answer. He knocked again, harder. A woman's voice came from inside, sharp with exhaustion. "Clinic's closed. Come back tomorrow. Ma'am, I got 6 sick children out here. One of them won't make it to tomorrow." Silence. Then the sound of footsteps, quick and decisive. The door flew open. Dr. Catherine Morrison was not what he'd expected. Tall, nearly his own height, with dark brown hair escaping from a practical braid. Her eyes were the brown of rich earth, and they swept over the children with a physician's trained assessment before landing on Ethan with a mixture of suspicion and something that might have been recognition. Not recognition of him. Recognition of what he was. A man at the end of his rope holding on only because 6 small hands had grabbed the fraying end. Her face cycled through emotions in the space of a heartbeat. Surprise, shock, and then a fury so pure it made the air between them crackle. "Dear God," the words came out strangled. What happened to them? Found them in a barn 3 miles out, been there 3 days by their telling. No food, no heat, no nothing. Kate's eyes found Eli in his arms, and something in her expression shifted, softened and hardened at the same time, if such a thing was possible. "Inside, all of you, now." The clinic's interior was warm, blessedly warm after the hours in the cold. A fire blazed in the hearth. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, filling the air with the scent of sage and lavender. Medical supplies lined shelves along one wall, neatly organized despite their obvious age. Kate moved like a general commanding troops. "You Sam, is it? Put your brother on that cot. Red, help Grace with that coat. Ben, sit by the fire." She turned to Eli, her hands already checking his pulse, his temperature, his breathing. "Consumption." "Yes, ma'am." "How long?" 8 months, maybe 9. "And you've been fighting all that time?" It wasn't a question. "You're the bravest child I've ever met." Eli managed a weak smile. "Just stubborn, ma'am." "Then we'll find you some more stubborn." Kate's eyes met Ethan's across the room. In them, he saw the same thing he felt. The same desperate determination to save what could be saved. The same willingness to fight against odds that were probably insurmountable. The same ghosts. She turned back to her work, but her voice carried clearly in the quiet room. "Mr. Cole, you can stay, or you can go, but if you stay, you're going to help me save these children's lives." Ethan looked at 6 pairs of eyes watching him, waiting to see if he'd leave like every other adult in their short, brutal lives, waiting to be abandoned again. Grace's voice, small and hopeful, broke the silence. "He'll stay. Angels always stay when you need them most." Ethan Cole had stopped believing in angels the day he'd buried his family. had stopped believing in God and justice, in the fundamental goodness of the universe. But looking at this child, this impossibly brave child who still had faith, despite everything he thought, maybe he could believe in something else, not redemption, not forgiveness, just this moment, these children, this choice. "Yeah," he said softly, "I'll stay." Outside, the wind howled through Redemption Creek, and somewhere in the darkness, Reverend Joshua Sterling was planning his next move. But inside the clinic, 6 children slept in warmth for the first time in days, and 2 broken adults stood watch, neither quite believing that morning would come, but hoping against everything they'd learned that it would. The first night was the longest of Ethan Cole's life. He sat by the fire, unable to sleep, listening to the sounds of the clinic settling around him. Grace whimpered in her dreams, calling for a mother who would never answer. Ben murmured comfort to his silent twin, their small bodies curled together on a pallet by the hearth. Rose sang softly in her sleep fragments of Irish lullabies that broke and reformed like waves on a distant shore. And Eli coughed, again and again. That terrible wet sound that meant his lungs were filling with what they shouldn't hold. Kate hadn't slept at all. She moved between the children like a ghost, checking temperatures, adjusting blankets, spooning medicine into Eli's mouth whenever his coughing eased enough to swallow. Her face in the firelight looked young and old, at once exhausted and determined, and beautiful in the way of things that had weathered harsh storms without breaking. Around 2 in the morning she brought him coffee, strong bitter, scalding hot. She sat down beside him on the wooden bench, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body, far enough to maintain the careful distance of strangers who weren't quite strangers anymore. "You should rest," she said. Her voice was rough with fatigue. "Can't. What if Sterling comes back?" "He won't. Not tonight. He's too smart for that. He'll wait. Let us think we're safe, then strike when we're vulnerable." Ethan turned to look at her. Really look at her. In the lamplight he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the silver threads in her dark hair, the calluses on her hands that spoke of years of hard work. She was younger than Sarah had been, but she carried herself with the same quiet strength, the same refusal to break no matter what the world threw at her. "You know him well." "Well enough." Kate's jaw tightened. "He's been in Redemption Creek since 1875, 14 years. Built that orphanage with donated money, presented himself as a pillar of the community, a servant of God." "But you don't believe that." "I did, once." She stared into the fire, her eyes distant. "Everyone did. He was so convincing, so earnest. He took in children nobody wanted, gave them shelter, food, education, or so we thought." "What changed your mind?" Kate was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My husband, Dr. Henry Morrison. He started noticing things, children who disappeared, families who came looking for adopted sons or daughters who'd supposedly been placed with good homes in California or Oregon, but when he wrote to those towns, checked those addresses, the families didn't exist. The houses were empty. The names appeared in no census, no church registry, no official record." Ethan felt something cold settle in his gut. How many children? Henry documented 63 disappearances between 1878 and 1887. 63 children who vanished without a trace. And Sterling was arranging it all, selling them, to mines that needed cheap labor, to ranches that needed hands who wouldn't ask for wages, to places Henry couldn't bear to name out loud. The word hung between them, ugly and impossible to ignore. Brothels. Sterling was selling children to brothels. Your husband tried to stop him. Henry tried to expose him, gathered evidence, spoke to witnesses, built a case he was going to take to the U.S. Marshal in Helena. Kate's voice went flat, empty. 6 months later, Henry was dead, officially typhoid. But Henry was healthy the morning he went to meet his final witness. By midnight he was burning with fever. By dawn he was gone. You think Sterling poisoned him? I can't prove it. The town doctor, Dr. Holloway, signed the death certificate. Typhoid. No autopsy, no investigation. Henry was buried 3 days later, and with him went all his evidence. His notes, his witness statements, his proof, all of it disappeared. Ethan thought about his own loss. Sarah and the twins taken by fire while he'd been chasing criminals who didn't matter. At least his had been an accident, A terrible, senseless accident. But Kate's husband had been murdered, silenced for trying to protect children who had no one else. I'm sorry. Don't be. Kate's voice hardened. Being sorry doesn't bring him back, doesn't stop Sterling from doing it again, doesn't save the next child or the one after that. She turned to face him, and in her eyes was a fire that had nothing to do with the hearth. But maybe stopping him will. Before Ethan could respond, a small voice cut through the darkness. Miss Kate. Grace stood in the doorway to the back room, swallowed by Ethan's coat, her blonde hair a wild tangle around her face. Her eyes were huge and wet with tears. What is it, sweetheart? Kate's voice transformed instantly, all the hardness melting into something warm and safe. Bad dream, and I had to use the privy, but it's dark and I'm scared to go alone. Grace's chin trembled. Sammy always takes me, but he's sleeping and I didn't want to wake him because he's so tired. I'll take you. Ethan stood before he could think about it. Grace looked up at him, then at Kate. Some silent communication passed between the woman and the child. Kate nodded almost imperceptibly. Okay, Grace said. She reached up and slipped her small hand into his. But you have to hold my hand the whole time. Promise. Promise. The privy was behind the clinic, a short walk through snow that had finally stopped falling. Grace's hand gripped his with fierce determination, her bare feet shoved into boots 3 sizes too big that made soft crunching sounds with each step. Above them the sky had cleared. Stars scattered across the darkness like diamonds on black velvet, so bright they cast shadows. The stars are pretty, Grace said, tilting her head back. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Mama used to say each star was an angel watching over us. Do you think that's true? Ethan looked up at the infinite sky. Sarah used to say the same thing, used to point out constellations to Michael and Emma, making up stories about the heroes and monsters written in light. I think it might be. I hope my mama's up there. I never met her, but I like thinking she's watching. Grace's voice was matter-of-fact, the way children discuss impossible things. Sammy says we shouldn't hope for things we can't have, but I can't help it. Hoping is the only thing that's free. The words hit Ethan like a fist. This child, 4 years old, abandoned on church steps, left to survive in Sterling's orphanage, had more wisdom than most adults would accumulate in a lifetime. That's a smart way to look at it. Eli taught me that. Eli's the smartest person I know, even smarter than Sammy, but don't tell Sammy I said so. They finished their trip to the privy in companionable silence. When they returned to the clinic, Grace didn't go back to her bed. Instead, she climbed onto Ethan's lap, burrowing into his chest like a small animal seeking warmth. Mr. Cole. Yeah, sweetheart. Are you going to stay for a while? How long is a while? I don't know yet. Her voice was getting drowsy, exhaustion and warmth pulling her under. My mama didn't know either. She left me at the church when I was a baby. Just put me on the steps and walked away. Reverend Sterling says she was a sinful woman, and I'm lucky he took me in. Rage flared in Ethan's chest, hot and sharp. Reverend Sterling is wrong about a lot of things. I know. Grace's voice was surprisingly hard for someone so young. He's mean. He hits Sammy when Sammy talks back. He doesn't feed us enough. He makes Eli work even when Eli can't breathe. She looked up at Ethan, and her eyes held a fierceness that made his heart break. I don't want to go back there ever. I'd rather die in the snow than go back to Grace Haven. Ethan gathered her closer, feeling the fragility of her small body, the trust she was placing in a man she'd known for mere hours. Listen to me, Grace. Listen careful. You ain't going back there. None of you are. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week, but I know this. As long as I'm breathing, Sterling ain't touching you again. You promise? I promise. Sammy says promises from grown-ups don't mean nothing. Sammy's got good reason to think that, but I ain't like the grown-ups you've known. When I make a promise, I keep it, even if it kills me. Grace studied his face for a long moment, her eyes searching for the lie she'd learned to expect from every adult who'd ever crossed her path. Whatever she found made her nod slowly. Okay. I believe you, Mr. Cole. Don't make me sorry. I won't. She fell asleep against his chest, her breathing evening out, her small fists clutching his shirt. Kate watched from across the room, something unreadable in her expression. When dawn finally came pale and cold through the windows, the children began to wake. They stirred slowly, disoriented, as if they couldn't quite believe they were still alive, still warm, still safe. Kate had breakfast ready. Oatmeal sweetened with honey, bacon-fried crisp bread toasted over the fire. The smell filled the clinic rich and warm and real. The children gathered around the table, 6 small bodies in chairs, too big for them, staring at the food, like it might vanish if they looked away. "Go ahead," Kate said gently. "Eat." Nobody moved. Ethan felt a knot form in his chest. "What's wrong?" Sam spoke, his voice hard and flat. "What do you want in exchange?" "Exchange for the food, for the beds, for the warmth. What do we have to do to pay for it?" Kate's face went pale. "You don't have to do anything. This isn't a trade." "Everything's a trade." Sam's hands were clenched into fists on the table. "Reverend Sterling gave us food sometimes, then made us work in the cold till our fingers bled, or locked us in the cellar, or worse." The other children nodded. Even Grace, young as she was, understood this fundamental truth of their existence. Nothing came free. Everything had a price. Ethan knelt down beside Sam's chair, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. "Listen to me, all of you. I don't want nothing. This ain't a trade. You're children. Children deserve to eat without earning it, deserve to sleep without fear, deserve to be warm and safe and cared for." "Nobody gives nothing for free," Sam said, but his voice wavered. "I do, starting now." Grace's small voice broke the silence. "Can I really eat all I want?" Kate's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "All you want, sweetheart, and then some more." Grace picked up her spoon with trembling hands, took a bite, and then, to everyone's shock, she started to cry. Not quiet tears, but great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried and ate and cried some more, shoveling food into her mouth between gasps. "It's warm," she choked out. "It's so warm." And then they were all crying. Sam tried to hold it in his jaw clenched tight, but tears streaked down his face anyway. Rose wept silently, one hand over her bandaged eye. Eli's thin shoulders shook as he struggled to eat and breathe and cry all at once. Ben started eating, murmuring to his silent twin, "Tommy, it's okay. They're good people. You can eat. It's safe." Tommy stared at his bowl, then at Ethan. Then, with infinite slowness, he picked up his spoon. Halfway through the meal, he made a sound. Not a word. Not quite. Just a soft hum of contentment. Ben's spoon clattered to the table. His whole body went rigid. "Tommy!" His voice was barely a whisper. "Tommy, did you just—" Tommy looked at his brother. And then, miracle of miracles, he spoke. His voice was rusty, unused, strange even to his own ears. "Good. It's good." The silence that followed was profound. Ben threw his arms around his twin, both boys crying now, years of separation and silence breaking like a dam. Sam's careful control cracked his face, crumpling into something raw and young and desperately hopeful. Even Kate had to turn away, pressing her hand to her mouth. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been clenched tight since the day he'd buried his family. It wasn't healing. Not yet, maybe not ever, but it was the beginning of something. The first small crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. After breakfast, the children scattered. Rose sang softly by the fire. Grace played with a rag doll Kate had found. The twins sat together, Ben talking quietly while Tommy listened and occasionally responded with a word or two. Sam followed Ethan outside to the woodpile. "You're gonna leave, ain't you?" The words came out flat, resigned. "Once we're better, once Sterling gives up, you'll go." Ethan set down the axe he'd been using to split logs. "What makes you say that? Everyone leaves. My pa died. My ma left on purpose. Every adult I ever trusted went away. It's what grown-ups do." "I ain't everyone." "How do I know that?" Ethan turned to face the boy fully. Sam stood with his arms crossed, his face set in lines too hard for 12 years old, but underneath the hardness was fear. Raw, desperate fear of being abandoned again. "You don't. Not yet. But I'm making you a promise right here, Samuel Wade." He put his hand on Sam's shoulder, feeling the boy tense but not pull away. "I had a son once. His name was Michael. He was brave like you. always protecting his sister, always trying to be strong for everyone else. You know what I used to tell him? Sam shook his head. I told him it's okay to let someone else be strong sometimes. That's what fathers are for, to carry the weight so their kids don't have to. You're not my father. The words were meant to hurt to push Ethan away before Sam got hurt first. Ethan recognized the tactic. He'd used it himself often enough. No, but maybe I can be something close, till you don't need me anymore. Sam's face worked, emotions flashing across it too fast to name. You can't fight Sterling. He owns this town. Sheriff, mayor, everybody. He'll kill you. He can try. And then we'll be alone again. Then I'll make sure he doesn't succeed. How can you promise that you're just one man? Because I got something Sterling don't. What? A reason to win. Before Sam could respond, a young boy Ethan didn't recognize came running up to the clinic. He thrust a folded paper at Ethan and ran off without a word. Ethan opened it. The handwriting was elegant, almost beautiful. The message was anything but. Mr. Cole, you have 24 hours to return the children to Grace Haven Orphanage. Failure to comply will result in legal action. Kidnapping is a federal offense. Reverend Joshua Sterling. Kate read over his shoulder. He's bluffing. He has to be. Is he? Ethan folded the letter carefully. This town does what Sterling says, don't it? Sheriff will arrest me if Sterling asks. Then we need proof, evidence that Sterling's been selling children, that he killed Henry, something concrete enough that even Sheriff Dawson can't ignore. A weak voice came from inside. Eli sitting up in bed, his dark eyes bright with fever and intelligence. Did your husband keep a journal? Kate turned startled. Yes. How did you know? Smart people always write things down, case somebody kills them for knowing too much. Kate's breath caught. Henry did mention something right before he died. He said, Kate, look where we first held hands. The truth is waiting there. Where was that? The old church. The one by Copper Creek. We met there during a Sunday service in 1880. That's where... She trailed off, realization dawning on her face. But that church was torn down in 1882. Sterling built Grace Haven on the foundation. So if your husband hid something there, it's under Sterling's orphanage now. Kate's eyes met Ethan's. We'd have to break in, search the basement, and if we're caught, we won't be caught. Ethan was already planning. We go tonight, after midnight. You know the layout. Henry showed me once. There's a cellar under the main building, stone walls. That's all that's left of the old church. Eli coughed, blood flecking his lips. Mr. Cole, when you find that journal, it's going to have more than just names. It's going to have proof, bills of sale, letters, everything you need to hang Sterling. How do you know? Because I seen him 2 years ago before I got sick. He took me to his office once, made me clean, and I seen papers with children's names and dollar amounts, $25 each, like we was livestock. The rage that Ethan had been holding in check flared white-hot. $25. That's what Sterling thought these children were worth. $25 for Sam's courage, $25 for Eli's brilliance, $25 for Grace's hope and Tommy's silence and Rose's songs and Ben's love for his brother. $25 for a human life. Tonight, he said, we get the evidence tonight, and then we end this. Kate nodded. The children stay here. We lock the doors. If anyone comes, Sam, you take the others out the back window. Run to Mrs. Chen at the laundry. Tell her I sent you. She'll help. Who's Mrs. Chen? Ethan asked. Kate's expression was grim. Someone else who has reason to hate Sterling. Her daughter disappeared from the orphanage 4 years ago. Officially, Lily Chen was adopted by a family in California. Mary's been searching ever since. I don't think she's found her. Another piece of the puzzle. Another life destroyed by Sterling's greed. Ethan looked at the 6 children gathered in Kate's clinic, at their faces still too thin, still marked by fear and hunger and years of abuse. But also marked by something else now, something that looked almost like hope. Grace tugged on his sleeve. Mr. Cole, you promise you'll come back after you go looking for the book. He knelt down and took her small face in his hands. I promise, sweetheart. On my life, I promise. Your life's important, though. What if something bad happens? Then I'll make sure nothing bad happens. She threw her arms around his neck, squeezing with surprising strength. You're my angel, mine and Sammy's and Eli's and everybody's. Angels don't die." Ethan held her close, this child who believed in angels despite everything the world had done to prove they didn't exist. He didn't have the heart to tell her that angels died all the time, that his own angels had died in fire while he was too far away to save them. But maybe, just maybe, he could keep this one alive. The day passed in tense preparation. Kate showed him the layout of Grace Haven drawing maps from memory. Ethan cleaned his revolver, checked his ammunition. The children stayed close, sensing the coming storm. As darkness fell, Ethan stood by the window watching the orphanage on the hill. Lamplight flickered in its windows. From here it looked almost peaceful, almost holy. But he knew better now, knew what hid behind those white-painted walls, what sins were committed in God's name. Kate came to stand beside him. "We're really doing this." "We are. If we're caught, Sterling will have us arrested, or worse. Then we don't get caught." She was quiet for a moment, then soft enough that he almost missed it. "Thank you, for staying, for fighting. Henry tried alone and it killed him. I thought I'd have to do the same. Thought I'd die trying and failing to stop Sterling. You ain't dying, and you ain't failing. We're ending this. Tonight." Kate turned to look at him, and in the lamplight her face was younger, softer, beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. "I believe you," she said, and then even softer, "I think Henry would have liked you." Before Ethan could respond, the clock struck 10. 2 hours until midnight. 2 hours until they walked into the lion's den and either found salvation or met their end. Outside snow began to fall again. And on the hill, Grace Haven Orphanage waited in the darkness, keeping its terrible secrets. But not for much longer. Midnight came too quickly and not quickly enough. Ethan and Kate left the children with Sam standing guard, his young face set in grim determination. The boy held a kitchen knife like he knew how to use it. Maybe he did. God knew what Sterling had taught these children about survival. The walk to Grace Haven took 10 minutes through streets gone silent and dark. Snow fell in heavy curtains, muffling their footsteps, turning the world into a ghost realm where nothing seemed quite real. The orphanage loomed above them, white paint glowing faintly in the darkness windows, black and empty, like the eyes of a skull. Kate led them to a side door, half hidden by drifted snow. Ethan worked the lock with tools he'd carried since his marshal days, feeling the tumblers give way one by one. The click when it opened seemed loud as a gunshot in the stillness. Inside the orphanage smelled of mildew and urine and something else. Fear. The kind of fear that soaked into walls and floorboards that became part of the building's bones. From somewhere above came the sound of children crying. Soft, hopeless sobbing that spoke of tears shed so many times they'd become routine. How many children were still up there trapped in Sterling's care? How many more would disappear before this ended? Kate touched his arm, pointed to a door beneath the main stairs. The cellar. They descended into darkness so complete Ethan had to feel his way down each step, one hand on the rough stone wall, the other gripping the oil lamp they'd brought. The cellar was older than the building above it, stone walls that had stood for decades, maybe longer. This had been the foundation of the original church, the one where Kate and Henry had first met, first held hands, first fallen in love. Now it was a tomb for secrets. Kate moved to the far wall, her fingers tracing the stones, searching. Henry stood right here. I remember because the light came through the window at just the right angle. He said it was like God was illuminating the moment. She pressed against a stone that jutted slightly from its neighbors. It shifted with a grinding sound that made Ethan's heart stop. Behind it, a hollow space. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, a leather journal. Kate's hands trembled as she unwrapped it. The pages were covered in neat handwriting, Henry Morrison's careful documentation of evil dressed as charity. Ethan held the lamp close and read. March 1887. Confirmed Sterling has sold 16 children to copper mines in Butte, ages ranging from 7 to 14, payment of $25 per child delivered in cash. June 1887. More disappearances. I've found bills of sale in Sterling's office. He's not even hiding it well. Arrogant. Certain no one will challenge him. September 1887. Worse than I thought. He's not just selling to mines. Made contact with establishments in San Francisco. Girls, ages 8 to 14. I can't write what they're intended for. Can't put those words on paper without being sick. Kate made a sound like she'd been punched. Ethan kept reading, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. November 1887. I have 3 witnesses willing to testify, men who've seen the transactions, who've delivered children to Sterling's buyers. They're terrified, but they'll speak. We can stop this. We can save them. December 1887. Someone is following me. I think Sterling knows. Kate doesn't suspect anything yet. I haven't told her. Can't risk her safety. But if something happens, if I don't survive this, the truth is here. 3 copies, 3 hiding places. She'll find them. She'll know what to do. January 15th, 1888. Meeting my final witness tonight. A man who claims to have direct evidence of Sterling's connection to San Francisco. If this is real, if he has what he claims, Sterling will hang. I'm taking my revolver, taking precautions, but I have a bad feeling. The last entry stopped mid-sentence as if Henry had been interrupted. January 16th, 1888. I was right to be afraid. The words were different, shakier, written by a hand that had started to tremble. Poison in the coffee at the meeting. Can feel it working, burning. Kate, my love, I'm sorry. I tried. Tell the children. Tell them someone tried. Tell them. The entry ended there. Henry Morrison had died the next morning, his death attributed to typhoid, his evidence scattered, his witnesses silenced or disappeared. Kate pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. This was the first time she'd seen her husband's final words, the first time she'd known for certain what she'd always suspected. Sterling had murdered him, coldly, efficiently, without remorse. Ethan closed the journal carefully. This is enough. This will hang him. Only if we can get it to authorities who aren't already bought. Sheriff Dawson won't help. Half the town council is in Sterling's pocket. Then we go over their heads. Federal marshals. I know a man in Helena, Dan Hayes. Good man. If we can get this to him. Kate nodded, wiping her eyes. There's more. Henry mentioned 3 copies. This is one. We need to find the others. Where? I don't know. He said I'd understand. Said I'd know where to look. A floorboard creaked above them. Ethan blew out the lamp instantly, plunging them into darkness. Footsteps. Multiple people, moving with purpose toward the cellar door. Good evening, Mrs. Morrison. Mr. Cole. Light flooded the stairwell. Sterling stood at the top holding a lantern. Behind him, Sheriff Dawson and 3 deputies, all armed. I've been expecting you. Sterling descended the stairs slowly, his black coat making him look like a shadow-given form. His pale eyes swept over them, emotionless as a snake's. Breaking and entering. Theft. I believe those are criminal offenses, Sheriff, Dawson's voice came from above. Hands where I can see them, both of you. Ethan kept the journal pressed against his chest, his mind racing through options. They were trapped. Outnumbered. If they were arrested, the journal would be confiscated, destroyed, and with it would die the only proof of Sterling's crimes. That journal doesn't belong to you, Sterling, doesn't it? Everything in this building is property of Grace Haven Orphanage, which makes you a thief, Mr. Cole. Sterling's smile was cold. How tragic. A drifter and a widow breaking into a house of God to steal private documents. Sheriff Dawson, I'm afraid I must insist on their immediate arrest. You killed my husband. Kate's voice shook with fury. You poisoned him. It's written right here in his own hand. The paranoid ravings of a man whose mind was already deteriorating. How sad that his illness progressed so far before his death. If only someone had noticed. If only someone had helped him. Sterling reached for the journal. Ethan pulled it away. You're not taking this. I don't need to take it. Sheriff Dawson will confiscate it as evidence, and evidence has a way of getting lost or destroyed, or simply never making it to trial. Dawson started down the stairs. Ethan looked at Kate, saw his own desperation mirrored in her eyes. They had seconds, maybe less. Run, he whispered. On 3, I'll cover you. I'm not leaving. 3. Ethan kicked the lantern Sterling was holding. It shattered against the stone wall, oil spreading in a pool of flame. In the sudden chaos, he grabbed Kate's hand and bolted for the stairs. Gunfire erupted behind them. A bullet ricocheted off stone inches from Ethan's head. They burst through the side door into the snow, running blind through the storm. Behind them, Sterling's voice carried on the wind. "Find them. I want them alive, for now." They ran through back alleys, through yards, stumbling over hidden obstacles beneath the snow. Kate's breath came in gasps. Ethan's wounded shoulder from years ago ached with the cold and exertion. But they kept moving, kept the journal safe, kept themselves ahead of pursuit. They reached Kate's clinic just after 1 in the morning. The building was dark, silent, wrong. Ethan felt ice settle in his gut even before he opened the door. The clinic was burning, not fully engulfed yet, but fire licked up the curtains, spread across the wooden floor, filled the air with smoke that stung his eyes and throat. Someone had thrown torches through the windows. Multiple windows. This wasn't an accident. This was execution. The children. Kate's scream cut through the roar of flames. She ran toward the building, but Ethan caught her, held her back even as she fought him. "Kate, wait!" And then he saw them. 6 small figures standing in the snow far enough from the building to be safe. Sam held Grace in his arms. Rose clutched Eli, keeping the sick boy upright. Ben and Tommy stood together, their hands locked. They were alive, all of them. Kate collapsed against Ethan, sobbing with relief. He held her up, held the journal in his other hand, and watched the clinic burn. All of Kate's medical supplies, all their shelter, everything gone in minutes. A figure stepped from the shadows. Sterling, not alone. 5 men flanked him, rough-looking characters Ethan recognized as the kind you hired when you needed violence done and didn't care about the law. "You should have returned them when I asked politely, Mr. Cole." Sterling's voice was calm, conversational, as if he were discussing the weather instead of attempted murder. "This is your final warning. Leave Redemption Creek. Tonight. Take nothing with you except your lives. And consider yourselves fortunate. I'm feeling merciful." Ethan's hand moved toward his revolver. One of Sterling's men was faster. The gunshot cracked through the night impossibly loud. Pain exploded in Ethan's left shoulder. He went down hard, the journal flying from his grip, snow and stars, and Sterling's face all spinning together in a kaleidoscope of agony. Kate screamed. The children screamed. Ethan tried to stand and couldn't, his left arm useless blood spreading hot and fast across his shirt. Sterling walked over and picked up the journal. He held it up, let the firelight illuminate the pages, then tucked it inside his coat. "How sad. The evidence has been destroyed in the fire, along with any hope you had of stopping me." He turned to the children. "Come along now. Time to go home." Sam stepped forward, putting himself between Sterling and the younger ones. His face was set in lines of pure defiance. "No, we're not going with you. Not ever." "That's not your decision to make, Samuel. It's mine." A new voice. A woman. She stepped from behind the remains of the clinic, a shotgun held steady in her hands. Small, no more than 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were black and hard as obsidian. Mary Chen, owner of the laundry. Mother to a daughter who disappeared 4 years ago. "Step away from those children, Sterling." Sterling's composure cracked just slightly. "Mrs. Chen, this is none of your concern. You took my daughter, Lily. You told me she went to a good family in California. Told me she'd have a better life. I believed you because I was fool enough to trust a man of God." Mary's voice was steady, despite the tears on her cheeks. "I found her. Took me 3 years, but I found her. In San Francisco, in a house where men pay to hurt little girls. She was 13 years old, Sterling, just turned 13. The shotgun didn't waver. "I stayed silent because I was scared. Because I'm Chinese. Because I thought no one would believe me. But I'm done being silent. I'm done being scared. Shoot me and you'll hang. Let them go, and maybe you'll live to see sunrise." The standoff stretched. Ethan could feel consciousness slipping, blood loss, pulling him down into darkness. Kate pressed her hands against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding, her face white with fear. Sterling calculated 6 men against 1 woman with a shotgun. The odds were in his favor, but Mary Chen looked ready to die, taking him with her, and Sterling, for all his evil, wanted to live. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Federal marshals are coming. They'll arrest everyone involved in this insurrection, And when they do, you'll all wish you'd accepted my mercy tonight." He turned and walked away, his men following. The fire continued to burn, consuming what remained of the clinic. Mary lowered the shotgun and ran to Ethan's side. "We need to move him. Can't stay here. Sterling will be back with more men." "Where can we go?" Kate's voice was ragged with panic. "I know someone. U.S. Marshal in Helena, name of Daniel Hayes. Good man, honest, he'll help." "Helena's 4 days' ride." "Then I leave tonight. You take the children and hide. There's a place. Henry's hunting cabin. Yes, in the mountains, go there. I'll bring Marshal Hayes back with help." Ethan tried to speak, managed only a groan. Hayes? Dan Hayes, he knew that name, had served with him in Wyoming back when they were both young men who still believed the law meant something. Mary looked at him, understanding in her eyes. "You know him, Hayes." Ethan nodded the motion, sending fresh waves of pain through his shoulder. "Then you know he'll come. You know he'll help. But you have to stay alive long enough for me to bring him back." Sam knelt beside Ethan. "How far to this cabin?" 15 miles, north, through the mountains." Kate's voice was hollow. "We'll never make it. Eli's too sick. Ben's leg. Mr. Cole is shot." "Then we help each other." Sam's young face was fierce. "We didn't survive this long to die now." Mary pressed something into Kate's hand, a small pouch. "Laudanum. For pain. For Eli's cough. Use it sparingly." She stood already moving toward the stables. 4 days, maybe 5. Don't light fires during the day. Don't leave tracks if you can help it. And whatever you do, don't give up. She paused, looking back at the 6 children. "My Lily died 6 months ago, took her own life rather than live one more day in that place. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can save you. Maybe that's why God let me live. To be here, now, for this." Then she was gone, swallowed by the storm. Kate helped Ethan to his feet. The pain was transcendent, white-hot, all-consuming, but he stayed upright. Had to. 6 children depended on him. A woman who'd lost everything depended on him. Grace tugged on his coat. "Mr. Cole, you're bleeding." "I know, sweetheart. Are you going to die?" "Not today." "Promise." He looked down at her, at those blue eyes that still believed in angels despite everything the world had done to prove they didn't exist. "I promise." They walked into the mountains as dawn threatened on the horizon. 8 people, 1 wounded, 1 dying, 2 children barely able to walk, moving through snow that reached their thighs, through cold that bit like teeth, through darkness so complete they had to hold hands to stay together. Sam carried Tommy on his back. Kate supported Ethan on one side, Eli on the other. Rose led them her Irish songs, the only sound besides the wind. Grace held Ben's hand, keeping the boy with the twisted leg moving forward. 5 miles in, Eli collapsed. He went down like his strings had been cut, coughing blood into the snow, his thin body convulsing. Sam dropped to his knees beside him, his face cracking into naked terror. "Eli, Eli!" The sick boy's eyes opened, focused on Sam with effort. Can't go on." "Yes, you can." Sam's voice broke. "You have to. We need you." "Been tired so long, Sam. So long." And then Sam cried, really cried. Not the silent tears of earlier, but great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. The boy who'd been strong for everyone, who'd protected 5 other children through years of hell, finally broke. "Don't leave me. Please, Eli, you can't. You're my brother, the only family I got." "You got a real family now." Eli's smile was peaceful despite the blood on his lips. "Mr. Cole, Miss Kate, they'll take care of you. You don't need me no more." Ethan knelt in the snow beside them, ignoring the screaming pain in his shoulder. He put his good hand on Eli's chest, felt the terrible rattling of failing lungs. "Listen to me, son. We all need you. You're the smartest one here, the bravest. You think I can do this without you? You don't. I need you, Elijah Monroe. So you're going to get up. You're going to let me carry you, and you're going to live. You hear me? You're going to love." Tears streaked down Ethan's face, mixing with the snow. "Because you remind me of my son, Michael. He was smart like you, brave like you, kind like you, and I wasn't there when he needed me. But I'm here now. I'm here for you." The memories crashed over him. Michael reading to Emma by the fire, Michael asking about marshal work, eyes shining with pride, Michael burning, Michael dying, while Ethan chased criminals who didn't matter. Grace started crying. Rose cried. Kate turned away, shoulders shaking. Even Tommy made small broken sounds of grief. They cried together in the snow, this makeshift family bound by trauma and hope, and the sound of their weeping was the saddest thing the mountains had ever heard. Finally, Eli reached up and touched Ethan's face. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, I'll try." Ethan lifted the boy in his arms, cradling him like he'd once cradled Michael, like he'd once cradled Emma, like he'd never be able to cradle his own children again. "Thank you," he said. To Eli, to God, to whatever force had brought them together. "Thank you." They rested in a cave at the 10-mile mark, built a small fire hidden deep enough that the smoke wouldn't be visible. The children huddled together, sharing warmth, sharing breath, sharing survival. Tommy sat beside his brother, watching Ethan bandage the gunshot wound with strips torn from Kate's skirt. "Mr. Cole." The voice was rusty, unused, strange even to Tommy himself. Ben's head snapped up. "Tommy, you talked. You talked." Tommy ignored him, his eyes fixed on Ethan. "Are you going to leave us like Mama did?" The question hung in the frozen air. 7 people held their breath, waiting for the answer. Ethan looked at this boy who'd been silent for 3 years. This child who'd watched his mother beaten, who'd retreated so far inside himself that words became impossible. Now asking the only question that mattered. "No, Tommy, I ain't leaving. Not ever. You know why—" Tommy shook his head. "Because you 6 are the bravest people I ever met, and I'd be honored to stand by you, for as long as you'll have me." Tommy launched himself at Ethan, small arms wrapping around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "Don't go, please, 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 don't go." Ethan held him, held them all, as they crowded close, seeking the comfort of touch, the promise of permanence. "I won't, son. I promise." They reached the cabin as the sun rose, painting the snow gold and pink, a small structure half buried in drifts, but solid, safe, hidden. The children stumbled inside and collapsed immediately, exhaustion claiming them all at once. Within minutes, 6 small bodies were asleep, tangled together like puppies. Ethan and Kate sat by the fire they'd built, too tired to speak, too wired to sleep. "You meant it," Kate asked finally. "You won't leave them?" "Every word." "Even if it costs you everything." Ethan looked at the sleeping children, at Sam's protective arm around Grace, at Eli's labored breathing, at Tommy curled against Ben, at Rose still humming in her sleep. "They already are everything." Kate's hand found his. Their fingers intertwined, 2 broken people finding something whole in the wreckage. Outside, the storm continued. Somewhere behind them, Sterling was planning his next move. Mary Chen was riding through blizzards to bring help that might arrive too late. But inside the cabin, 8 souls rested. 8 people who'd chosen each other when the world had thrown them away. 8 hearts beating in rhythm, keeping time with hope. And for now, for this moment, that was enough. The cabin became a world unto itself. For 3 days they lived suspended between past and future, caught in a present that consisted of survival measured in hours, sometimes minutes. The storm that had chased them into the mountains showed no signs of breaking. Wind screamed around the cabin's corners. Snow piled against the walls until the windows were half buried. They might have been the last people on Earth. Ethan's fever came on the 2nd night. The gunshot wound had festered despite Kate's best efforts. Infection set in, turning his blood to fire his thoughts to fragments of memory and hallucination. He lay on the narrow cot by the fire, sometimes conscious, more often not, caught in dreams that felt more real than waking. Sarah came to him in those dreams. She stood in their kitchen in Boise sunlight, streaming through the window, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, the way she wore it in the mornings before pinning it up. She was making breakfast, eggs and bacon, and the cornbread she knew he loved. Michael and Emma sat at the table arguing over a book. Michael wanted to read about lawmen and outlaws. Emma insisted on fairy tales. They compromised as they always did, taking turns. Michael read a page, then Emma, their young voices blending together in that way that only twins could manage. Sarah turned and saw him standing in the doorway. Her smile was sunlight itself. "There you are," she said. I was wondering when you'd come home. I'm sorry. The words caught in his throat. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have been here, should have stayed. You were doing your job, protecting people. That's who you are, Ethan. But you needed me. The children needed me. Sarah crossed the kitchen and took his hands. Her touch was warm, real, more real than anything had been in 5 years. We needed you and you weren't there, that's true. But Ethan, my love, you can't change what happened. You can only choose what happens next. I don't know how. Yes, you do. She looked past him and he turned to follow her gaze. 6 children stood in the doorway. Sam and Eli Rose and Grace Ben and Tommy, not as they were now, thin and scared and marked by Sterling's cruelty, but as they might be, healthy, happy, whole. They need you, Sarah said, the way Michael and Emma needed you. But this time you're here. This time you can choose to stay. I failed you. You didn't fail us. You failed yourself. You stopped believing you deserved to be loved, to be needed, to be someone's everything. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears. But those children, they're giving you another chance. Don't waste it, Ethan. Don't waste it by holding on to guilt that serves no one. Michael spoke then, his voice the same as Ethan remembered, young, bright, full of hope. Papa, it's okay. We're okay. Mama's with us. We're not alone. Emma took her brother's hand. You have to take care of them now, the way you took care of us. They need a papa, and you need to be one. The dream shifted. The kitchen dissolved into smoke and flame. Ethan tried to reach for them, but they were already gone. Already ash, already memory. Sarah's voice followed him up through layers of fever, the last thing he heard before his eyes opened to firelight and the smell of pine and Kate's worried face hovering above his. The way you took care of us. They need a papa. He woke to find Sam sitting beside the cot, a damp cloth in his hand, wiping Ethan's forehead with the careful concentration of someone much older. You were talking in your sleep, Sam said quietly. Said names. Sarah, Michael, Emma, my family. Ethan's voice was rough, unused. The ones I lost. You said you were sorry, said it over and over. Ethan closed his eyes. Even awake, the dream clung to him. Sarah's touch, the children's voices, the forgiveness he didn't deserve, but they'd given anyway. Sam, can I ask you something? Sure. Your mother, when she left. Did you hate her? Sam was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was smaller than Ethan had ever heard it. Yeah, I hated her. Still do sometimes. She chose herself over me, chose some man heading west over her own son. He paused. But mostly I just miss her. Miss having someone who was supposed to love me no matter what. She should have stayed. Yeah, she should have. Sam looked at Ethan and his eyes were ancient. But you stayed. When you could have walked past that barn, when you could have left us with Sterling, when you could have run after the fire, you stayed. I had to. No, you didn't. That's the thing, Mr. Cole. You didn't have to. You chose to. There's a difference. Ethan felt something crack in his chest. This boy, 12 years old, carrying wisdom that men twice his age never found. Sam, I need you to understand something. I'm not trying to replace your father or be your mother. I'm just trying to be here, to be someone you can count on. I know, Sam's hand tightened on the cloth, but Mr. Cole, if you wanted to be something like a father, I wouldn't mind. The words hung between them fragile as spun glass. I'd be honored, Ethan said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Sam's face crumpled. He tried to hold it in, tried to be strong, but he was just a child, just a boy who'd been forced to grow up too fast and too hard. He collapsed against Ethan's chest, careful of the wounded shoulder, and sobbed. Ethan held him. This child who'd protected 5 others through hell. This boy who'd never let himself be weak, never let himself need, never let himself hope that someone might stay. I got you, Ethan whispered. I got you, son. I ain't going nowhere. The other children woke to the sound of Sam crying. One by one they gathered around the cot, drawn by the sound of someone finally being allowed to fall apart. Grace climbed up beside Ethan, tucking herself under his good arm. Rose sat at the foot of the bed, humming soft and low. Ben and Tommy pressed close to Sam, the twins offering silent comfort. And Eli, weak as he was, managed to sit up on his own pallet. Mr. Cole, His voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah, Eli. Can I tell you something? Anything." "I used to pray, back when Mama was alive. Used to ask God to send someone to take care of us after she was gone. Someone kind. Someone who wouldn't hurt us." Eli coughed, but continued. "I stopped praying when Sterling took me in. Figured God either wasn't listening or didn't care." "Eli, but then you walked through that barn door, and I thought maybe God was listening after all. Maybe he just took a while to answer." Tears tracked down Ethan's face. He didn't try to stop them. "I ain't no answer to prayer, son. I'm just a broken man who happened to be in the right place." "That's what prayers are, though." Eli's smile was peaceful despite the pain etched in every line of his thin face. Just broken people showing up for each other, being in the right place, choosing to care when they could walk away. Kate stood in the doorway watching. She'd been tending to the fire, to the meager supplies they'd brought, to all the practical matters of survival. But now she crossed to the cot and knelt beside it. "He's right, you know. You're exactly what we prayed for, what I prayed for. Someone who wouldn't give up, someone who'd fight even when the odds were impossible." "Kate." She took his hand, laced her fingers through his. "Henry was a good man, a brave man, but he fought alone, and it killed him. You're not alone. We're all in this together, and maybe that makes all the difference." Grace's small voice broke the moment. "Are we really going to be okay?" "All of us." No one answered immediately. How could they promise that Sterling was still out there? The law was on his side. They were fugitives hiding in a cabin while winter tried to kill them and evil men plotted their destruction. But Ethan looked at these 6 children, at this woman who'd lost everything and kept fighting anyway, at this makeshift family, held together by nothing but choice and hope and stubborn refusal to break. "Yeah, sweetheart, we're going to be okay." "How do you know?" "Because we got each other, and that's stronger than anything Sterling's got." The third day brought a change in the weather. The wind died, the snow stopped. Silence fell over the mountains, deep and profound and almost holy. It also brought visitors. Ethan heard the horses before he saw them. Multiple animals moving through snow coming from the direction of Redemption Creek. He was on his feet in seconds, revolver in hand, despite the way his wounded shoulder screamed protest. "Get the children to the back room," he told Kate. "If shooting starts, you run. Don't look back. Ethan, please." She gathered the children, herded them toward the small room that served as storage. Sam tried to stay, but Ethan shook his head. "Protect them. That's your job now. Keep them safe no matter what." Sam nodded, his young face grim, and followed the others. Ethan positioned himself by the window, gun ready. If this was Sterling's men, if they'd found the cabin, he'd take as many with him as he could. Give Kate and the children time to run. The riders emerged from the trees. 8 of them. No 9. And in the lead, Mary Chen. She was alive. Frozen half to death, her lips blue with cold but alive. And beside her rode a man Ethan recognized even after all these years. Daniel Hayes, U.S. Marshal, tall and solid as an oak with a gray beard that spoke of years in service and eyes that had seen too much but never stopped caring. He wore the star on his chest like a promise, and behind him rode 7 more marshals, all armed, all looking like they meant business. Ethan opened the door as they dismounted. "Dan Hayes, I'll be damned." Hayes looked him up and down, taking in the blood-stained shirt, the pallor of fever, the way Ethan swayed on his feet. "Ethan Cole. Heard you'd disappeared. Heard you'd gone to ground after the fire. Thought maybe you'd drunk yourself to death in some nowhere town. Thought about it. Never quite got around to it." Hayes smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Mrs. Chen tells me you've gotten yourself into some trouble." "That's one way to put it." "Got 6 children you're protecting. Got a corrupt reverend trying to kill you. Got evidence of a child trafficking operation that's been running for over a decade." Hayes stepped closer. "That about cover it, more or less." "Then I'd say you're in exactly the kind of trouble that needs a marshal. Lucky for you, I brought 7. Kate emerged from the back room, children behind her. They stared at the marshals with the wary eyes of people who'd learned that badges didn't always mean safety. But Mary Chen slid from her horse and ran to them, gathering Grace into her arms, touching Sam's face, looking at each child like they were precious beyond measure. "I told you," she said, her voice breaking. "I told you I'd bring help." Hayes surveyed the children, his expression hardening with each face he saw. The two thin bodies, the marks of abuse, Eli's labored breathing, Tommy's haunted eyes. He'd seen a lot in his years as a marshal, but this clearly hit him somewhere deep. "How bad is it in Redemption Creek?" Kate spoke up. "Sterling's been selling children for at least 11 years, maybe longer. He killed my husband when Henry tried to expose him. He's got the sheriff and half the town council in his pocket. He left these 6 to die in a barn because they were too sick, too broken, too much trouble." Hayes' jaw tightened. "And the evidence? Journal, written by my husband. Documents 63 missing children, bills of sale, names of buyers, locations, everything needed to convict." Kate's face fell. "But Sterling took it. When he shot Ethan, we lost it." "Not entirely." Hayes reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather-bound book. "Found this in Sterling's office when we arrested him this morning." The world seemed to stop. "You arrested him." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "Soon as Mrs. Chen told me what was happening, I got federal warrants. Came in at dawn with all 7 of my men. Sterling tried to run, didn't get far." Hayes's smile was cold. "He's in custody. So's Sheriff Dawson. So's everyone else on the council who was involved. But how Sterling's got connections, money, power." "Had." Past tense. Hayes opened the journal, showed them pages filled with Henry Morrison's careful handwriting. "This thing is a roadmap to hell. Names, dates, amounts. More than enough to hang Sterling 10 times over. And when I started making arrests, people started talking. Turns out a lot of folks in Redemption Creek knew what was happening. They just needed someone to tell them it was okay to speak up." Mary Chen's voice was quiet but fierce. "I told them. I stood in the town square and told them about Lily, about my daughter, about what Sterling did to her. And then others came forward, parents whose children had disappeared, workers who'd seen things. Even some of Sterling's own people turned on him once they knew the law was really coming." Kate pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "It's over. It's really over. The criminal part. Yeah, Sterling's going to trial. Federal charges. He'll hang." Hayes looked at the children. "But there's still the matter of what happens to these 6. Sam stepped forward, his body rigid with tension. "We're staying together, all of us. You can't separate us." "Son, I'm not here to separate anyone. I'm here to make sure you're safe and cared for." Hayes knelt down to Sam's level. "But the law requires that orphaned children be placed in proper homes, with families who can provide for them." "We got a family," Sam's voice cracked. "Mr. Cole and Miss Kate. They're our family." Hayes looked at Ethan, then at Kate. "That true? You two planning to take on 6 children?" Kate spoke without hesitation. "Yes, all of them, together." "You married?" "Not yet," Ethan said. "But we will be, if she'll have me." Kate turned to him, eyes wide. "Ethan, I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I also know I can't imagine my life without you in it, without them in it." He looked at the children, then back at Kate. "Will you marry me? Will you help me raise these 6? Will you build a family with me out of all these broken pieces?" Kate didn't answer with words. She crossed to him and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. The children erupted in cheers. Even Eli managed a weak laugh. When they finally pulled apart, Kate was smiling through tears. "Yes, yes to all of it." Hayes cleared his throat. "Well then, that simplifies matters. I'll need to file paperwork, get a judge to approve the adoption. Might take a few weeks." "We'll wait." Ethan pulled Kate close with his good arm, the children gathering around them. "We've got time now. Got all the time in the world." That night they all slept in the cabin together. The marshals stood guard outside, making sure Sterling's remaining allies couldn't make one last desperate move. Inside, 8 people who'd been strangers 10 days ago lay tangled together like they'd been family forever. Ethan couldn't sleep. The fever had broken, but his mind was racing, processing everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. Eli stirred on his pallet, coughed softly. Ethan went to him, knelt beside the sick boy. "How you feeling, son?" "Tired, but good tired. Like maybe I can rest now." Eli's eyes found Ethan's in the firelight. "Mr. Cole, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When you and Miss Kate get married, when you adopt us official, can I call you something different than Mr. Cole?" Ethan's throat tightened. What did you have in mind? Pa. The word came out soft, uncertain. If that's okay, if you don't mind. I know I ain't really your son. I know you had a real son once, and he died, and I can't replace him, but Eli. Ethan gathered the boy close, careful of his fragile body. You don't have to replace anyone. You're not second best. You're not a substitute. You're my son. If you want to be. All of you are. Even though I'm dying. The words were matter of fact. No self-pity, just truth stated plainly. Even though you're fighting, even though you're the bravest person I've ever met, even though every day you're alive is a gift. Ethan's voice broke. Especially because of all that. Eli smiled. It was the most beautiful smile Ethan had ever seen. Okay then, Pa, I like the sound of that. The other children woke, then drawn by the sound of Eli's voice. They crowded close, all of them seeking the same thing. Permission. Permission to hope. To belong. To be wanted. Can we all, Sam asked, can we all call you Pa? Ethan looked at Kate. She was sitting up, tears on her face, nodding. And can we call you Ma? Grace asked Kate. Even though you didn't birth us, even though we're not really yours. Kate pulled Grace into her lap. You are really mine, all of you. From the moment I opened my door and saw you standing there, you've been mine. Then we're really a family, Rose's voice was wondering. Really and truly, Ethan said. Tommy spoke, then his voice still rough from disuse but growing stronger each day. I never had a pa, not one I remember, but I think you'd be a good one. I'll try, son. I'll try my best. Ben smiled. That's all anyone can do, try their best. They sat together in the firelight, this family born of trauma and choice, and let themselves believe in tomorrow, in weddings and adoptions and futures that didn't involve running or hiding or fear. Outside, dawn was coming. The storm had passed. The mountains stood silent and beautiful under fresh snow. And somewhere to the south, in a jail cell in Redemption Creek, Joshua Sterling sat in darkness and waited for justice he'd avoided for too long. But in the cabin, 6 children slept in the arms of 2 adults who'd promised to keep them safe, who'd promised to love them, who'd promised to stay. And for the first time in their short, brutal lives, they believed those promises might actually be kept. Mary Chen watched them from the doorway, her own face wet with tears. She'd lost Lily, would carry that grief until her own dying day, but maybe, just maybe, she'd saved these 6, given them the chance her daughter never had. Marshall Hayes stood beside her, his expression soft in the firelight. You did good, Mrs. Chen. Real good. We all did. That's the thing about fighting evil. You can't do it alone. You need people who'll stand beside you, who'll ride through blizzards and risk everything and refuse to give up. That what you're going to tell the judge when this goes to trial. That and more. Mary's voice hardened. I'm going to make sure Sterling hangs. Going to make sure everyone knows what he did. To my Lily. To these 6. To all the others we'll never know about. Justice coming for him, finally. Not just justice, truth. The whole ugly truth. So it never happens again. Hayes nodded. Amen to that. Inside the cabin, Ethan finally slept. And for the first time in 5 years, he dreamed of the future instead of the past. He dreamed of a wedding, of 6 children in their finest clothes, standing proud as Kate walked toward him, of saying vows that meant something again, of choosing to love and be loved in return. He dreamed of a home, not the one he'd lost in Boise, but a new one, built with his own hands, filled with laughter and arguments and all the beautiful chaos of family life. He dreamed of watching them grow, Sam becoming a doctor, Eli living long enough to see it, Rose singing on stages, Grace believing in angels because she'd been saved by one, Ben and Tommy building something together, the silent twin finding his voice fully at last. He dreamed of growing old beside Kate, of grandchildren, of a life well lived. And when morning came bright and cold and full of promise, he woke to find it wasn't just a dream, it was a beginning. The journey back to Redemption Creek took 2 days. They traveled slowly, carefully, with Marshall Hayes and his men forming a protective circle around the family. Word had already spread through the territory. The Reverend who'd preached mercy while selling children. The Marshal who'd ridden through a blizzard to bring him down. The woman who'd lost her daughter but saved 6 others. People lined the streets when they arrived. not to jeer or condemn, but to witness, to see for themselves that evil could be defeated, that justice, delayed as it might be, could still arrive. Kate's clinic was gone, reduced to charred timber and ash, but the town had already begun rebuilding. Volunteers worked in the cold, raising new walls, donating supplies. A sign hung on what remained of the front door, "For Dr. Morrison and the children. We're sorry we looked away." Mary Chen had organized it all, had shamed the town into action with her testimony about Lily, about the daughter they'd all known, the sweet girl who'd played in their streets, who'd disappeared one day, who they'd chosen to forget rather than question. Guilt was a powerful motivator. They stayed with Mary while the trial was prepared. Her home above the laundry was small but warm. The children slept in the main room, tangled together on pallets, while Ethan and Kate took turns keeping watch, still not quite believing they were safe. The trial was set for February 14th, Valentine's Day. Kate found dark humor in that. A day meant for love used to condemn a man who'd commodified children. Sterling sat in the jail beneath the courthouse awaiting judgment. Sheriff Dawson occupied the cell beside him, his earlier arrogance replaced by the hollow-eyed fear of a man who'd realized too late that he'd bet on the wrong side. The town transformed in those weeks. Guilt drove some of the change, but something else too. Relief. People had known something was wrong, had felt it in their bones, but knowing and acting were different things, and it was easier to look away than to stand up to a man with power and influence and God on his side. Now they didn't have to look away anymore. The courthouse was packed on the day of the trial, every seat filled. People standing along the walls, more gathered outside in the cold, waiting for news. Judge William Harrison presided. A territorial judge from Helena, brought in specifically because everyone local was compromised. He was 70 years old with white hair and eyes that had witnessed every kind of human evil and still chose to believe in redemption. The prosecutor was a young man named Thomas Brennan. Fresh from law school in Boston, idealistic and burning with the kind of righteous fury that comes from seeing the world's ugliness for the first time. Sterling's lawyer was expensive, brought in from Chicago, a man who specialized in defending the indefensible and had a reputation for getting guilty men acquitted through technical loopholes and jury manipulation. But this wasn't Chicago, this was Montana Territory, and the evidence was damning. Brennan opened with Henry Morrison's journal, read passages aloud in a voice that shook with controlled rage. 63 names, 63 children, 63 lives destroyed for profit. Then came the bills of sale. Actual documents with Sterling's signature, $25 for a 7-year-old boy, $30 for a girl of 12, prices that varied based on age, gender, perceived usefulness. The courtroom sat in horrified silence. Sterling remained impassive throughout, his face a mask of benign concern, as if this were all a terrible misunderstanding that would surely be cleared up. Then Brennan called his first witness. The prosecution calls Mrs. Mary Chen. Mary walked to the stand with her back straight, her head high. She wore her best dress, black silk that she'd brought from China 40 years ago. She'd been saving it for something important. This qualified. She told her story without embellishment. Lily's birth, her childhood, her placement in Grace Haven when Mary's husband died and she couldn't afford to keep her daughter fed. Sterling's promises, the adoption paperwork, the letters that stopped coming after 6 months. "I searched for 3 years," Mary said, her voice steady, despite the tears on her cheeks. "Wrote to every town in California. Finally, a woman wrote back, said she'd seen a Chinese girl matching Lily's description, working in a house in San Francisco, a particular kind of house." She looked directly at Sterling. "I went there, found my daughter. She was 13 years old. She'd been there since she was 9, since the day Reverend Sterling sold her." The courtroom erupted. Judge Harrison had to bang his gavel repeatedly to restore order. "What happened to your daughter, Mrs. Chen?" "She took her own life. 3 months after I found her. She was too broken to keep living." Mary's voice finally cracked. "The last thing she said to me was, 'I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry I couldn't be good enough for someone to want to keep me.'" The silence that followed was absolute. Sterling's lawyer tried to discredit her. Suggested she was lying. Suggested her grief had driven her mad. Suggested a dozen other things that made the people in the courtroom shift uncomfortably ashamed to be witnessing this attack on a grieving mother. But Mary Chen didn't break, didn't waver. She'd already survived the worst thing that could happen to a parent. A lawyer's words were nothing compared to that. The prosecution called witness after witness. Men who'd delivered children to Sterling's buyers, women who'd asked about adopted children and been given false addresses, former employees of Grace Haven who testified about the conditions, the punishments, the casual cruelty dressed up as discipline. And then, on the second day of trial, Brennan called the children. The prosecution calls Samuel Wade. Sam walked to the witness stand like he was walking to his execution. 12 years old, dressed in new clothes donated by the town, his hair combed back, his face scrubbed clean. But his eyes were ancient. He swore to tell the truth, his hand on the Bible, and sat down. Brennan's voice was gentle. "Sam, can you tell the court how you came to be at Grace Haven Orphanage?" "My pa died in the mines 2 years ago. Cave in. They sent him home in a box." Sam's voice was steady, practiced. "My ma couldn't feed me and herself both, so she left. Went to California with some man who promised her a better life. Told me I'd be better off at the orphanage." "And was it better?" "No, sir." "Can you describe life at Grace Haven?" Sam did, in detail. The work they were forced to do, the beatings for minor infractions, the locked cellar where children were punished for crying or complaining or asking for food, the way Sterling would visit at night, sometimes choosing children for special attention that left them hollow-eyed and silent. The courtroom listened in mounting horror. Sterling's face never changed, never showed a flicker of emotion. "Sam, do you know what happened to some of the other children, the ones who disappeared? Sterling sold them. We all knew it. He'd tell us they were being adopted, going to good families, but we knew." Sam's jaw tightened. "Because sometimes they'd come back, not to stay, just passing through with whoever bought them, and we'd see how they looked, what had been done to them. And we knew." "Did Reverend Sterling ever threaten you?" "Every day. Said if we told anyone what was happening, no one would believe us. Said we were orphans, defective, broken things nobody wanted. Said we were lucky he took us in at all." Brennan let the words hang in the air. "What changed? Why did you end up in that barn?" "He decided we weren't worth feeding anymore. Eli was too sick. Tommy wouldn't talk. Ben's leg made him slow. Rose only had one eye. Grace was too young to work. And me, I talked back too much." Sam looked at Sterling. "He said God would take us faster than food would. Put us out in the coldest night of winter and lock the door behind us. And then Mr. Cole found us." Sam's voice softened. "He could have kept walking. Should have. We weren't his problem. But he stopped, picked us up, carried us to safety, fought for us when no one else would." Brennan nodded. "Thank you, Sam. No further questions." Sterling's lawyer stood. "Mr. Wade, isn't it true that you have a history of lying, of making up stories for attention?" "No, sir." "Reverend Sterling's records indicate multiple incidents of dishonesty." "Reverend Sterling's records are lies." Sam's voice was flat. "He wrote down whatever made him look good and us look bad, made it easier to sell us if people thought we were troublemakers." The lawyer tried several more tactics, but Sam was unshakable. He'd been preparing for this his whole life. Every adult who'd ever dismissed him, every authority figure who'd chosen to believe the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth. He was done being dismissed. The prosecution called Elijah Monroe next. Eli walked to the stand with Kate's help. He was dying. Everyone in the courtroom could see it. His skin had taken on a translucent quality. His breathing rattled, but his eyes were clear and sharp and determined. He swore his oath, sat down, looked at Sterling with an expression that held no hatred, no fear, only pity. "Eli, how long were you at Grace Haven?" 4 years, since my mama died of consumption when I was 5. "Can you tell us what you witnessed during those 4 years?" Eli did, in a voice that grew weaker as he spoke but never wavered. He detailed the sales, the visitors who came late at night, the money that changed hands, the children who left and never came back. "I kept track," Eli said, "in my head. Couldn't write it down 'cause Sterling would have found it. But I remember every name, every face, every child he took from us. How many? 23, while I was there. 23 children sold like livestock. Brennan approached the stand. Eli, you're very ill. Why did you insist on testifying today? Because I'm dying anyway. Eli's smile was peaceful. And if I'm going to die, I want it to mean something, want it to matter. If my testimony puts Sterling away, if it saves even one child from what happened to us, then it was worth it. My whole life was worth it. The courtroom was silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle. 200 people holding their breath. Eli, is there anything else you'd like to say? Eli turned in his chair, looked not at Sterling but at Ethan sitting in the front row with Kate and the other children. Yeah, I want to say thank you. His voice was soft, but it carried. Thank you to Mr. Cole, to Pa. The word landed like a thunderbolt. For the first time in my life I got a family, a real family. People who chose me not because they had to, not because they got paid, but because they wanted to, because they loved me. Tears streaked down Eli's face. I'm dying. We all know it. But I'm dying loved, dying wanted, dying someone's son. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. That's everything. Ethan stood without thinking, crossed to the witness stand. The bailiff moved to stop him, but Judge Harrison raised a hand. Let him go. Ethan gathered Eli in his arms, this dying boy who'd become his son, and held him while the courtroom watched. I love you, Ethan whispered. I love you, Elijah. You're my son, my boy, and I'm so damn proud of you. I love you too, Pa. Eli's arms tightened around Ethan's neck. Thank you for stopping at that barn. Thank you for staying. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The judge was wiping his face. The jury was openly crying. Even Sterling's expensive lawyer looked shaken. Brennan approached. Your Honor, I think we can all agree this witness has given enough. The prosecution rests. Judge Harrison nodded. The witness is excused. Mr. Cole, please return to your seat. But before Ethan could move, the other children rushed forward. Sam and Rose and Grace and Ben and Tommy. They surrounded Eli and Ethan, all of them crying, all of them holding each other. Kate joined them, put her arms around all of them. This family that had been forged in fire and suffering and had somehow impossibly survived. Judge Harrison didn't try to restore order, just watched his old eyes soft as this makeshift family held each other in his courtroom and showed everyone present what love actually looked like. Finally they separated. Ethan carried Eli back to his seat. The children followed. The trial continued. But something had shifted. The jury had seen enough. The town had seen enough. There would be no acquittal, no technical loopholes, no clever lawyering that could undo what they'd just witnessed. Sterling's lawyer called character witnesses, people who testified to the Reverend's good works, his charity, his devotion to God. But their words rang hollow after what had come before. Sterling himself took the stand, denied everything, called the children liars, called Mary Chen a grieving woman driven mad by loss, called Henry Morrison a paranoid doctor who'd succumbed to mental illness. He was calm, reasonable, convincing in the way that sociopaths often are. But then Brennan asked one simple question. Reverend Sterling, do you love the children in your care? Sterling smiled, that benevolent pastoral smile he'd perfected over decades. Of course, I love all God's children, even the defective ones, the broken ones, the ones who are too sick or too damaged to be of use. Something flickered in Sterling's eyes, just for a moment, a crack in the mask. All children have value in God's eyes, but not in yours, because you threw 6 of them out to die in a blizzard, children you claim to love. They wandered off. I've explained this. 6 children ranging in age from 4 to 12 with various disabilities and illnesses all wandered off together on the coldest night of the year, and you didn't go looking for them. We searched. We prayed for their safe return. Brennan pulled out a document. This is the logbook from Grace Haven, the official record of all children in residence. It shows 6 names crossed out on January 14th, 3 days before Mr. Cole found them, crossed out and marked as deceased. Sterling's face went white. You didn't search for them because you thought they were already dead. You'd left them to die and you were covering your tracks. Isn't that right? That's not. You marked them deceased 3 days before they were found, 3 days before anyone knew they were missing. How did you know they were dead, Reverend, unless you'd put them in that barn yourself? Sterling had no answer. The careful mask he'd worn crumbled. What showed beneath was cold and reptilian and utterly inhuman. Those children were a drain on resources, sick, crippled, useless. They would have died anyway. I simply expedited the inevitable. The courtroom exploded, people shouting, the judge banging his gavel, Sterling's lawyer trying desperately to control the damage. But it was too late. Sterling had condemned himself with his own words. The jury deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood with tears streaming down his face. We find the defendant Joshua Sterling guilty on all counts. Murder, child trafficking, fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, all of it. Judge Harrison sentenced him immediately. Joshua Sterling, you have used God's name to justify unconscionable evil. You have betrayed every trust placed in you. You have destroyed lives for profit and called it mercy. The judge's voice shook with controlled rage. I sentence you to death by hanging. Sentence to be carried out at dawn 3 days hence. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none to give. Sterling was led away in chains. He passed by the row where Ethan sat with his family, stopped, looked at them with those empty eyes. You think you've won, he said quietly, but there are more like me. There will always be more like me. The world runs on cruelty, Mr. Cole. Your little victory changes nothing. Ethan stood, looked Sterling in the eye. Maybe, but those 6 children are alive. They're safe. They're loved. And they'll grow up knowing that sometimes, just sometimes, the good people win. That's not nothing. That's everything. Sterling was dragged away. The courtroom erupted in cheers. Kate pulled Ethan into a kiss. The children mobbed them both. Mary Chen stood to the side, crying silent tears for the daughter she'd lost and the children she'd helped save. Marshal Hayes approached with papers in hand. Judge wants to see you, both of you. Says he's got some business to finish. In the judge's chambers, Harrison sat behind his desk, looking tired but satisfied. Congratulations on your victory. The children's testimony was remarkable, particularly young Elijah's. Thank you, Your Honor, Kate said. Now to other matters. You two planning to marry? Yes, sir, Ethan said. Soon as we can arrange it. How about now? They stared at him. I'm authorized to perform marriages in the territory. Got the power invested in me by the government and God, depending on which you put more stock in. Harrison smiled. Seems to me those children have waited long enough for a stable family. No reason to wait any longer. Ethan looked at Kate. What do you say? She laughed, the sound bright with joy and relief and love. I say yes. I said yes before. I'll keep saying yes. Harrison married them right there in his chambers, with the children as witnesses, with Mary Chen standing as matron of honor, with Marshal Hayes and his men lining the walls. It wasn't the wedding Kate had probably dreamed of as a girl, no white dress, no flowers, no church full of guests. But when Ethan slid the simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love her for the rest of his days, when she promised the same when they kissed as husband and wife, while 6 children cheered, it was perfect. More than perfect. It was real. Judge Harrison filed the adoption papers the same day, made it official, made it legal. 6 children who'd been nobody's problem were now Ethan and Kate Cole's responsibility, privilege, and joy. That night they gathered in Mary's home for a celebration. Simple food, donated wine for the adults, fresh milk for the children. But it felt like a feast. Eli sat in the place of honor, propped up with pillows, his breathing labored, but his smile bright. Make a toast, Sam said to Ethan. Pa, make a toast. Ethan stood glass in hand, looked at his family, his wife, his children, his friend. To second chances, to the people who take them, and to love that chooses to stay, even when it would be easier to walk away. They drank. They laughed. They told stories late into the night. And Eli, sitting in the center of it all, surrounded by people who loved him, looked more at peace than he'd ever been. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and gentle and beautiful. Inside, a family celebrated. Not the family any of them had been born into, but the family they'd chosen, the family they'd fought for, the family they'd become. And in a cell beneath the courthouse, Joshua Sterling sat in darkness and waited for dawn. But here in Mary Chen's warm kitchen, there was only light, only love, only hope. And for tonight, for this perfect moment, that was enough. Spring came early to Montana that year. By late March, the snow had begun to melt. Water ran in rivulets down the streets of Redemption Creek, carrying away the last remnants of the hardest winter anyone could remember. Wildflowers pushed through the wet earth. Trees budded. The world turned green and gold and alive. Eli died on the first day of April. He'd held on through the trial, through the wedding, through 2 more months of borrowed time. Kate's medicines eased his suffering, but couldn't cure what consumed him from within. They all knew it was coming, had known from the beginning. But knowing didn't make it easier. The morning started like any other. Ethan woke before dawn as he always did and checked on the children. They'd moved into a house the town had built for them, a proper home with enough rooms for everyone. Donated lumber, donated labor. The town's way of saying sorry for the years they'd looked away. He found Eli awake, sitting up in bed watching the sunrise through the window. "Morning, Pa." "Morning, son. How you feeling?" "Tired." Eli smiled. "But it's a good tired, the kind that comes after you've done something important." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "You want breakfast? Kate's making pancakes." "In a bit. First, I want to talk to you about something." "All right." Eli looked out the window at the sunrise, painting the sky pink and gold. "I'm not scared. Of dying. I thought I would be, but I'm not." Ethan's throat tightened. "Eli, let me finish, Pa, please." Eli's hand found Ethan's. Thin fingers wrapped around calloused palm. "I used to think dying meant I'd failed, like I wasn't strong enough or good enough to keep living. But now I think maybe it just means my work here is done. Your work, making sure the others are safe, making sure Sterling pays for what he did, making sure you and Ma have a family." Eli coughed, but it was gentle, almost peaceful. "I did all that, so now I can rest. You're 9 years old. You shouldn't have to rest. You should have years ahead of you. Decades. Should doesn't matter much. What matters is what is." Eli turned to look at Ethan, and his dark eyes were clear and calm. "I got 9 years, and the last few months of them were the best months of my life. I got a family, I got a home, I got to see Sterling brought to justice. That's more than most people get, Pa. That's enough." Ethan pulled Eli into his arms, careful of the fragile body, and held him while tears streamed down his face. "I love you. I love you so much, Elijah. You're my son. You'll always be my son. I know." Eli's voice was soft against Ethan's shoulder. "That's why I'm not scared, because even when I'm gone, I'll still be yours, and you'll still be mine. Death doesn't change that." They sat together as the sun climbed higher. Kate came in with breakfast, saw them, and set the tray aside. She climbed onto the bed and wrapped her arms around both of them. The other children followed, Sam and Rose and Grace and Ben and Tommy. They piled onto the bed until it was a tangle of arms and legs and beating hearts, all of them holding Eli, all of them holding each other. "Tell me something," Eli said. His voice was getting weaker. "Tell me what you're all going to do. After. I want to know the future's good." Sam went first. "I'm going to be a doctor, like Dr. Morrison, like Ma, going to help people who don't have anyone else." "That's perfect." Eli smiled. "You'll be the best doctor this territory ever saw." Rose spoke next, her Irish accent thick with tears. "I'm going to sing, going to travel to every town and city and let people hear songs that make them remember there's beauty in the world." "Beautiful," Eli coughed. "Ma will be so proud." Grace's small voice was next. "I'm going to help people, like you helped us, going to make sure no one ever feels unwanted again." "My angel." Eli touched her blonde hair. "You'll save so many." Ben and Tommy spoke together, their voices overlapping the way twins often did. "We're going to build things, houses and barns and schools, places where families can be safe." "Perfect, both of you. So perfect, Dad." Kate's turn. "I'm going to run a clinic, a real one, where anyone can come rich or poor and get help, and I'm going to name it after you. The Elijah Morrison Cole Memorial Clinic." Eli's eyes widened. "Really? Really? Because you taught me what it means to fight even when you're dying, to hope even when it seems hopeless. Finally, Ethan. I'm going to make sure your story gets told, all of your stories, Going to make sure people remember what happened here, what Sterling did, what you survived, so it never happens again. Good. Eli's breathing was getting shallower. That's good. They held him as the morning wore on, held him as his breathing slowed, held him as the light in his eyes began to dim. Around noon, Eli stirred one last time. "Mama, we're here, sweetheart. We're all here." "It doesn't hurt anymore. I can see something. Someone." His face filled with wonder. "It's Mama. She's here. She's so beautiful." "Tell her we love her," Kate whispered. "She knows. She says—" Eli smiled, the most beautiful smile Ethan had ever seen. "She says thank you for taking care of her boy, for giving him a family, for loving him when she couldn't anymore." "Eli," Sam's voice broke. "Eli, please don't go." "Have to, Sam. But it's okay. It's good." Eli's eyes found each of them one last time. "I love you, all of you. You're my family, forever." His eyes closed. His breathing stopped. And Elijah Morrison Cole, 9 years old, died surrounded by love. The silence that followed was infinite. Then Grace screamed, a child's scream of pure anguish. She threw herself on Eli's still body, shaking him, begging him to wake up. Sam pulled her away, held her, while she fought him, while she sobbed that it wasn't fair, that Eli was supposed to get better, that angels were supposed to save people. Rose collapsed, her singing voice turned to wails of grief. Ben and Tommy held each other, both crying, Tommy's hard-won words dissolving back into broken sounds of pain. Kate buried her face in Ethan's chest and wept for Eli, for Henry, for all the children they couldn't save, for the cruelty of a world that took the best and brightest too soon. Ethan held them all, his wife, his children. This family that had lost one of its own. He held them and let them break, because sometimes breaking was the only way through. Outside, the town heard the crying, understood what it meant. By evening, Mary Chen's house was surrounded by flowers, by notes, by people paying respects to a child most of them had never met, but whose courage had changed everything. They buried Eli on the hill behind the new clinic, where he could watch the sunrise every morning and the sunset every evening. The whole town came, people who'd testified at the trial, people who'd donated to rebuild, people who'd done nothing but wanted to do something now. Judge Harrison spoke though no one had asked him to. He'd delayed his return to Helena just for this. I've presided over hundreds of cases in my career, seen the best and worst of humanity, but I have never witnessed courage like Elijah Monroe Cole's. He was 9 years old, dying, and he stood in my courtroom and spoke truth to power with a bravery most grown men never find. The judge's voice was rough with emotion. He reminded us that children are not property, not commodities, not things to be used and discarded. They are human beings deserving of love and protection and the chance to grow up safe. Eli didn't live long, but he lived well, and he left this world better than he found it. That's all any of us can hope for. They lowered the small coffin into the ground. Ethan had built it himself, working through the night, needing something to do with his hands while his heart broke. It was simple pine, but he'd carved Eli's name on top with care. Elijah Morrison Cole, beloved son, 1880 to 1889. Each family member placed something in the grave. Sam put in a medical textbook so Eli could study in heaven. Rose added a songbook. Grace placed her rag doll, the one Kate had given her that first night. Ben and Tommy contributed a drawing they'd made together showing all 8 of them as a family. Kate placed a stethoscope. So you can keep watching over us, keep making sure we're healthy and safe. Ethan knelt by the grave, tears streaming freely down his face. He placed a marshal's badge inside, the one he'd worn years ago, before the fire, before the loss, before he'd become the man kneeling here now. "You made me remember what it means to protect people," he said. "Not because it's a job, because it's right. Thank you for that, son. Thank you for everything." They filled in the grave, planted wildflowers around it, stood together as the sun set, 8 people who'd become 7, feeling the absence like a wound that would never fully heal, but would eventually scar over, would become part of their story instead of the end of it. That night, Grace crawled into bed between Ethan and Kate. "Is Eli really with the angels now?" Kate smoothed her hair. I believe so, sweetheart. Then I was right. About Mr. Cole being an angel, Grace's logic was childlike but pure, because he brought us to Eli, and Eli brought us to being a family, and now Eli gets to be an angel too. So it all worked out the way Mama said it would. Ethan pulled her close. This child who still believed in angels despite everything. Or maybe because of everything. Yeah, Gracie, I think you're right. He said 2 months earlier, in mid-February, the town had hanged Joshua Sterling. The execution happened 3 days after the trial, exactly as Judge Harrison had decreed. But for the Cole family, that day felt like a distant memory, now overshadowed by a more immediate loss. The execution was public, as the law required. The town turned out to witness justice done. Ethan attended, but he left the children at home. They'd seen enough death, enough darkness. They didn't need to see this. Sterling walked to the gallows with the same cold composure he'd maintained throughout. No confession, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives he'd destroyed. Judge Harrison read the charges one final time, asked if Sterling had any last words. Sterling looked out at the crowd, at the people who'd once respected him, feared him, obeyed him. You think this ends anything? There are orphans in every town, desperate children no one wants. Someone will always profit from that desperation. Always. He smiled. Kill me if it makes you feel righteous, but the machine keeps running. The trapdoor opened. Sterling dropped. His neck broke clean. It was over in seconds. The crowd was silent. No cheers, no celebration, just the grim satisfaction of seeing justice delayed, but not denied, finally served. Mary Chen stood beside Ethan as Sterling's body was cut down. Is it enough? She asked quietly. Does it bring them back, Lily, Eli, all the others? No. Ethan's voice was heavy. Nothing brings them back. But maybe it saves the next ones. Maybe that's all we can ask for. Maybe. They walked away from the courthouse together, leaving Sterling's body to be buried in an unmarked grave. No ceremony, no marker, just dirt and forgetting. The world moved on. Kate's clinic opened in May, the Elijah Morrison Cole Memorial Clinic carved in letters above the door. She treated everyone who came through, rich or poor, asking only what they could afford. Some paid with money, some with labor, some with nothing but gratitude. She turned no one away. Sam apprenticed with her learning medicine with the same fierce determination he'd once used to protect his siblings. At 13, he was already reading medical texts meant for adults, already assisting with procedures, already dreaming of the day he'd have his own practice. Rose's voice grew stronger. She sang in church on Sundays, in the saloon on Saturday nights, anywhere people gathered. Songs of loss and hope and survival. People came from neighboring towns just to hear the Irish girl with one eye and a voice like heaven. Grace started a school for orphans in the room above Mary Chen's laundry, teaching them to read and write and believe they were worth something. She was 8 years old and already changing lives. Ben and Tommy worked with their father, learning carpentry and construction. Together they built additions to the clinic, new homes for families, a proper schoolhouse. Tommy spoke more every day, his silence replaced by quiet competence and steady love for his twin. The family grew, not in number but in depth. In the 1,000 small ways families grow when they're built on choice instead of blood. Ethan taught the older children to ride, to shoot, to defend themselves not because they'd need to, but because they deserved to know they could. He taught them about the law, about justice, about the difference between the two. Kate taught them about healing, about science and medicine, and the importance of caring for the broken, about how sometimes the most important thing you could do was show up and refuse to leave. Together they taught them about love, the kind that stayed, the kind that fought, the kind that chose you every single day. Years passed. Sam graduated from medical school in Denver, at 19 the youngest in his class. He returned to Redemption Creek and opened his practice next to Kate's clinic, mother and son working side by side, healing the territory one patient at a time. Rose married a rancher from Miles City. She still sang, but now it was lullabies to her own children, 3 daughters with red hair and voices like bells. Grace never married. She devoted herself to her school, to the endless stream of children who needed someone to believe in them, She was Redemption Creek's angel, people said. The little girl who'd asked if Ethan was an angel had become one herself. Ben and Tommy started their own construction company, built half the new structures in the territory. They were inseparable, still finishing each other's sentences, working in perfect synchronicity. Tommy spoke regularly now, though he was still a man of few words. But when he spoke, people listened. And Ethan and Kate grew old together, not in loneliness, but surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Their home was always full, always loud, always filled with love. On a spring morning in 1914, 25 years after they'd found 6 children in a barn, Ethan sat on the porch of the house he'd built with his own hands. He was 63 years old. His hair had gone silver. His hands trembled sometimes from old wounds that never quite healed. But he was happy. Kate came out with 2 cups of coffee, settling into the chair beside him. She was 59, still beautiful, still fierce, still the woman he fell in love with in the middle of a Montana winter. Sam's bringing the grandchildren over later, all 7 of them. Good. Tommy and Ben are finishing the addition, should have enough room for everyone now. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb over the mountains. Below them, Redemption Creek bustled with morning activity. The town had grown, prospered, become the kind of place where children were safe. "Do you think about them?" Kate asked. "Sarah and the twins, every day, but it doesn't hurt like it used to. Now it's just remembering, honoring who they were. They'd be proud of you, of what you built here. We built, all of us." Ethan took her hand. "I didn't save those children, Kate. They saved me. You saved each other. That's how it works." Grace appeared on the path leading a line of children from her school. She waved, calling out a greeting. Behind her came Sam, in his doctor's coat, making house calls. Rosa's daughters ran past, singing in harmony. Ben and Tommy's wagon rumbled by loaded with lumber for another project, the family they'd built. Not just the 6 they'd adopted, but the hundreds who'd been touched by what happened here, by 6 children who'd survived, by 2 broken adults who'd chosen to put themselves back together, by a town that had learned to look instead of look away. "Ethan," Kate's voice was soft, "do you have any regrets?" He thought about it, really thought about it, about the life he'd lost and the life he'd found, about Sarah and Michael and Emma, forever young in his memories, about Eli, 9 years old, forever watching over them from wherever good souls go, about Sam and Rose and Grace and Ben and Tommy grown now building their own lives, creating their own families, about 25 years of joy and sorrow, triumph and loss, love given and received. "No," he said finally, "no regrets, just gratitude." That evening the whole family gathered for dinner. 30 people crammed into the house, spilling onto the porch, filling every room with noise and laughter and life. Sam stood to make a toast, his medical degree framed on the wall behind him, his own children at his feet. To Pa and Ma, 25 years ago, you could have walked past that barn. Should have walked past. It would have been easier, safer, smarter. His voice thick with emotion. But you stopped. You saw 6 kids who nobody wanted, and you chose us. You fought for us. You loved us. And because of that, all of this exists. He gestured to the crowd. This family, this love, this life. So here's to stopping at barns, to choosing the hard path, to love that stays even when it would be easier to leave. They raised their glasses, drank, laughed, told stories late into the night. And somewhere Ethan could have sworn he felt it. A presence, watching, approving, Eli, Sarah, all the ones who'd gone before who'd made this moment possible. He stepped outside for air, overwhelmed by gratitude and love and the sheer improbability of it all. Kate followed as she always did. "You all right?" "Yeah, just thinking about how it all started. That barn, that question." "Are you the angel?" "Yeah." Ethan smiled. "Grace asked if I was an angel, and I said no, but maybe I was wrong." "How so?" "Maybe we're all angels, when we choose to show up for each other, when we choose to love when it would be easier to walk away, when we choose to stay." Kate kissed him soft and sweet and full of 25 years of partnership. "Then this world is full of angels. We just have to look for them." Inside, the family continued their celebration. Outside, stars emerged in the darkening sky. And if you listened carefully, You could almost hear it. A child's voice, bright and clear and full of hope. Are you the angel Mama promised would come? And the answer finally after all these years, yes, yes I am. We all are, when we choose to be. The story of 6 children saved from a frozen barn became legend in Montana Territory, became the story parents told their children about the importance of stopping when you saw someone in need, about the difference one person could make when they chose to act instead of looking away. But for the Cole family, it was never a legend. It was just their beginning. The moment when 8 broken people found each other in the darkness and decided to become whole together. And that more than justice served or evil defeated was the real miracle. Not that they survived, but that they learned to live again. Together. The end.